Hello.
Hi,
Good
how are you?
good morning. I am good. I am stepping in again for Remy. She's on vacation. You probably are aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and John said me that if you are gonna do the emceeing, I'm okay. I will just listen.
Yeah, I won't be able to stay for the entire meeting here, but I can get things started for us. And if you'd like me to bring up the slides, I can go through them. How would you like to handle the
Yeah,
beginning?
usually when we do the slides in the beginning, you can do the slides in the beginning, then our speakers start to talk, then if you wanna leave, you can leave. I can manage the rest of the session.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to stay for the questions at the end, unfortunately, but I'll do my best to help facilitate that. Does that
Okay.
sound okay?
Yep, sounds okay. I'm trying to
Wonderful.
figure out why my video is not working. Okay. Huh.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Can you hear me fine?
I can't, I didn't understand. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can. I don't see your video, but I can hear you fine. And I was just going to make you a co-host as well.
Okay.
So then you have that ability. And I do see some participants there. So I'll start to let some of those folks in. I don't, let's see. There we go.
Hello,
Hi, Zona. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for being here today. I am helping out Remy today. I do communications for Repowering Schools. She's out on vacation, returning next week here, and I'm going to help out,
Awesome.
introduce you, and get everything started for the meeting.
Sounds great.
Wonderful. I will bring up the slides here so we can get that started. And we'll start it in a couple minutes. We'll make sure some more folks are coming in and we'll get them all situated here.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone who has joined the call. Zona, do you have any questions at the start here for us? I assume you have some slides to share as well.
I do, yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe I could try to to make sure that that's working.
Yeah, I might need to add you as a co-host, but let's see. Do you want to
Okay.
try that before I hit share on my opening
Yeah.
slides?
Is that going?
Yeah, I can see that. So I
Okay.
think
Awesome.
perfect.
Okay. Great.
All right, so I'll go ahead and share my opening slides. Thanks for checking.
We have time. I will just sign up and sign in again to see if my video start working.
Okay, no problem. Can you see my opening slide?
I can.
Thank you for verifying that. All right. Let's wait a couple more minutes here and we'll get going. Let's see. I can, hi.
Hi. Finally. Hi, everyone.
That's okay. I can see you and hear you. So wonderful. And then some more folks coming in. So great. Hello, everyone.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good.
We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. And thanks for being here today. Here's Zona Martin. Got 9 joined and many more to come in. Some folks come in a little after the start time, which is fine, but we'll be ready to go here pretty soon.
Can you make co-host again?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Can you make co-host again?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for reminding me of that. Let's see here. Let's see, I lost you. Let's see. Let me know if this goes through. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. All right. Let's jumping in now, huh? Up to 15 folks here so far. Starting here just one more minute. Make sure I can capture everybody. I have to let people in the way this has been set up, so I don't want to miss anybody before I get started here. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Bill Kite. As you can see, I'm Remy today. I do communications for Repowering Schools. Remy is finishing up her vacation with her family, so she'll be back next week. And she's excited for today's discussion, as I am, and everyone that has taken part up to this point. So thanks everyone for being here. It's going to be another great discussion. I'll just go ahead and get started. As people continue to come in, wanted to share the upcoming opportunities with Repowering Schools. I know many of you have seen this slide and understand all the wonderful things we have going on here at Repowering Schools, but just a quick reminder that we do have some stakeholder engagement grants that are due on June 15th. You can find that information on our website at repoweringschools.org. Several programs that we're currently working with for conference experiences. We have ACES and RE Plus applications upcoming and due. Energy Academy, Repowering Careers, the collegiate competition that just took place this past month, which was very well attended and a wonderful opportunity if you hadn't heard. And then we're also working on some new programs, Repowering Forward, as well as creating our communities for networking for the students and our faculty. And we also have our rewards program that has now opened for public voting for nominees for recognized scholars, educators, and students for renewable energy space. So I wanted to remind everybody of that. All that detail is on our website, repoweringschools.org. And for those that are attending our field experience this Saturday, we've got some more information. This will be emailed in your inboxes via Remy. She will be sending this map that you see here. I assume everybody can see the screen. If not, please do let me know. And for those who don't know all the details, there is a solar installation training that will take place at New River Community College. The address is there. Again, we will send this in our inboxes, but feel free to take a screenshot. Just quick logistics. We're going to meet at 1:45 and it's going to go to about 5. So it will be a longer day and it is all outdoor. So please understand that it's going to be a warm day and you want to bring lots of water. Sunscreen is probably appropriate, and they are asking to do long pants, closed toe shoes for this particular, field experience. And there'll be hard hats and gloves to be worn, but we are going to provide those. So please let us know if there's any problems with that. Please let Remy know, of course. You are able to park in the campus lot A. It's a free parking situation, and you'll see the solar trailer behind Edwards Hall there. So please take note of that. If you have any questions, reach out to me or Remy at repoweringschools.org, and you will receive information soon. If there's any questions on that, please chime in and I'll move on to the next slide if not. All right, moving on. The other details for the field experience coming up, we will have our second site visit on June 13th with Dimension Energy Site, and that's at Pamplona, Virginia. And we're going to have a kind of a precursor Zoom meeting on June 10th at 1 p.m. It's going to be a prep call with the staff, and it's important to please attend that. This information also will be coming into your inbox for all who have signed up. And we're also having our mock public hearing on June 12th as well. And the following couple days after at 1 p.m. Zoom will be sent. Most of you have already received that. If you haven't, do let us know. And without further ado, today's session, State Level Policies and Processes by Zona Martin, Siting Solutions Analyst of Clean Tomorrow. I'm going to have her share her screen and I will unshare, and we're very excited to have Zona here today. Thank you, Zona.
Thank you. Okay. Can y'all see the screen now?
Let's see it just yet on my end.
Okay, let me see. Oh, I did it right the first time.
No worries. And if I have to do a co-host, I will. There we go.
Got it?
I think it's starting to come up. We're in.
Okay, great. Here, let me move y'all's faces. Okay. Okay, well, hello, everyone. My name is Zona Martin. I'm the Siting Solutions Analyst at Clean Tomorrow. I'm really grateful to have been invited to speak with you all today. I do think it's really important just to bring more experts into this field. Siting specifically, I'm going to try and get you all on the siting train. The more people out there that are working on these problems, the quicker that we'll have them solved. So, and just like you a few years ago, I was a student, just eager to learn and learn more about this space and figure out where I might fit in. And so I do want to touch on that a little bit, because Rumi did mention that y'all were kind of interested in the career development aspect of all of this as well. So happy to share more on that if y'all have questions later. But I received my bachelor's degree in government at UT Austin in 2020. That was during the pandemic, so I just quickly went straight to grad school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, called the School for Environment and Sustainability. When I was there, like first starting out, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to do like sustainability, like city planning. And I just kind of, domino effect fell into renewable energy, planning, zoning, siting and permitting. I did a capstone project that was advised by Dr. Sarah Mills, who is kind of like one of the nation's best siting experts in this space, and just learned a lot about renewable energy planning, and at the local level, like how siting processes and zoning processes work, and then how that translates to state level siting policy as well. So I have all of these linked here, but if you want to check out my capstone project, we created a pilot program for the Michigan State Department that addressed barriers to permitting renewable energy at the local level. From there, I got my first job at Eagles Energy Services Unit, which is the State Department. They hired me to kind of continue that project on. We created a grant program called the Renewables Ready Communities Award, as well as a technical assistance program called the Renewable Energy Academy, where we went and spoke with local governments across the state about renewable energy, about planning and zoning for these technologies. And when the new siting law came into effect in 2023, helping them prepare for that changing policy landscape and what that meant for them. Um, After that, I moved back to Texas and took a job here at Clean Tomorrow. So now I'm the Siting Solutions Analyst supporting the Siting Solutions project. So what does that mean? Clean Tomorrow is a nonpartisan organization, and we advance practical solutions to decarbonize our future. And we do that through building coalitions and policy solutions that accelerate the growth of renewable energy, as well as the innovation of clean energy technologies. So we have two policy initiatives, like two pillars. The first is innovation, and the second is siting. I focus solely on our siting initiative called the Siting Solutions Project. At the Siting Solutions Project, we address energy, siting, and permitting barriers by providing expert policy analysis to stakeholders and decision makers. And most of those stakeholders are like advocacy organizations or trade associations or just specific stakeholders that are working in key states that are trying to pass legislation to be able to better deploy and build solar and wind energy and battery storage. So day to day, that looks like me tracking legislation, providing monthly or on the fly reads of citing policies, moving through state legislatures. My colleague Nelson Falkenberg will develop policies that work for specific state contexts. Our team as a whole will convene stakeholders in the siting space to ensure that we're coordinating in our policy strategies across the country and are just sharing out best practices and new research on this topic. And lastly, providing technical assistance directly, as well as strategic advice to our partners, our stakeholders, and organizations to really move the needle on clean energy development. So how we frame this work that we're doing is around the immediate problems that we're facing in the next few years. And that main challenge, and we see it as an opportunity, is that power demand is surging, thanks in large part to the explosive growth of AI driving data center build out, increasing electrification of transportation and buildings, and a rise in domestic manufacturing. So, coupled with that is the rise in retail electricity prices due to the challenge to meet that growing power demand. So, we need to build more clean energy. We need to build more energy, and renewable energy happens to be the cheapest and fastest way to get there right now. However, restrictions on clean energy are proliferating. Contested cases of renewable energy projects are increasing across the US. And right now, nearly 1 in 4 counties across the United States have effectively banned wind or solar development through their local zoning ordinances. And I want to give you a visual of, what that looks like. So, starting here, really, since we're focusing on solar today, around 2020 is when things really started getting difficult. A lot of the sites started, have been kind of chosen already and developed on, and now we're getting to places where, local governments aren't as accepting and want to restrict these projects. And so now, as of 2024, 2/3 of developers list restrictive zoning ordinances and community opposition as among the top 3 reasons that they have canceled their development projects. So, how does permitting work exactly? So all of it really falls on siting authority, who maintains that siting authority. In some states, a renewable energy project's approval is determined solely by the local government's planning commission. And how that works is a local government will adopt a zoning ordinance that basically regulates land use in their locality. And a renewable energy developer will submit a proposal for what's called a conditional use or special land use permit to the local government to build that project. The planning commission or county commissions, council, or other relevant body will review that proposal and decide whether to approve or deny the application based on their zoning ordinance and review criteria. So in other states, a state agency has that authority over permitting, and typically this happens through legislative processes and rulemaking. They will establish their own review processes and criteria to consider those proposals against. And then in other states, it's really a mix of both. There's local permitting here, there's state permitting there, and it's kind of a spectrum based on specific criteria. And I'll get into that later. But the main point of this presentation that I want to dive into is like what state level siting policy can look like, all of the different approaches of that. But I think it's first important to touch on these foundational points of why communities are passing such restrictive zoning ordinances for renewable energy. In my previous job, I talked a lot to communities in Michigan, and most of the results of this survey that I'm showing on the screen here really do ring true in practice, like anecdotally. So most of the projects getting built nowadays are over 100 megawatts. We're doing really large scale projects now because that's just kind of what makes sense economically for developers, economies of scale. So for context, think like 5 to 10 acres per megawatt. And an American football field is roughly 1.3 acres. So think of like 500 football fields of solar panels minimum for an average renewable or solar project. That's a huge change for a rural community that's become accustomed to seeing rows and rows of crops their entire life, and they take a lot of pride in that agricultural lifestyle. And so you have this loss of what they perceive as this peaceful rural vista of agricultural natural life that's potentially being replaced with buzzy, noisy solar inverters and the visual aesthetic impacts of a solar farm, as well as their perceptions of the loss of farmland and the perceived ecological and environmental impacts. And while the degree of those impacts may go unfounded by the data, that's still how they feel, and that makes it real. And so this community has those perceptions of a renewable energy project going in, and the actual economic benefits of these projects are essentially invisible. Renewable energy projects contribute a significant amount of personal property tax revenue to these communities, and that's producing more revenue for some rural counties than they've ever seen before. However, these benefits go largely unnoticed, and this 2023 national survey that I have on the screen reveals that most rural residents really don't believe that their community would receive any revenue if they were to host renewable energy, which is completely untrue. They would, but it's hidden in those municipal budgets. It's being used on services that maybe everyday residents don't use and so therefore don't know about. I also don't want to discredit political ideology on these technologies as well. But basically, when you add it all together, that's the crux of the issue. There's these perceived impacts that are too high. The perceived benefits are too low to offset that. So where's that compelling case for hosting a project? I'll talk later about this concept of trust as well, which is really important in building local acceptance. So I want to preview this report or just dive into this report, the state policy approaches to renewable energy siting. this kind of gets at what we can do about these local restrictions, this rising local opposition that has turned into completely blocking renewable energy projects from being able to be built at the local level. So one way of addressing those restrictions is through improving siting policies at the state level. So to understand how to improve those policies, we first need to understand what's on the books. And so that's what this report does. We released it last May, and so some of these things, we just had a legislative session, so some of this information might be a little outdated.
This call is no longer being recorded.
But basically, it provides a summary of every utility scale wind and solar siting policy framework that's been used across the continental United States as of March 2025. The report doesn't tell you what's best, but it will provide a comprehensive look at the suite of policy approaches, discrete policy considerations, and just examples of the policies used in specific states. And so the map here is from our report and shows by state whether wind or solar projects are primarily sited by the state through a hybrid or local approach, cited by the local government with state guardrails, cited locally, or if the state just has kind of no regulations on siting whatsoever. And as you can see, nearly every state uses a combination of approaches for siting clean energy. There's only a handful that, only utilize one single approach. And that's also kind of a lesson that we like to drive home is it's never a one size fits all solution. It always has to fit your specific state context. And so, yes, like I said, there are a myriad of ways to design siting policy. Most states use a combination, and the equivalent policies in law may differ in practice and how they're implemented and what the overall objective of the state was in passing that policy. So this table on the right is going to be kind of our map for how we go through the next few slides. On this left side here, this kind of touches on what I said earlier of like we kind of have three buckets. We have the state siting bucket, we have local siting bucket, and then we kind of have a mix in the middle. And that's kind of what this is reflecting here. And so we have up at the top, we have predominantly state siting. So within this are siting policy frameworks that fit, or siting policy approaches that fit within that state siting framework. And this is the only one that is solely within the state authority bucket. And then at the very bottom, we have minimal siting regulations. So kind of think of this as like a spectrum. Like at the very top, it's fully state. And then as you go further down, you get more and more local control, local authority over permitting decisions up until the point where there just aren't any regulations at all. So we identified 15 different policy frameworks and sorted the states into each. And most commonly, a state will have distinct permitting processes for large projects and for small projects. That is called contingent state authority, and that's at the top here in the predominantly state siting bucket. In other cases, a state will have multiple permitting pathways available to developers, regardless of project size. And that's where we get into this local hybridity, like opt-in, opt-out kind of framework. Down here in this third bucket, the state guardrails framework allows local governments to retain principal siting authority, but are subject to restrictions or parameters or guardrails that are enacted by the state legislature. And finally, it's crucial to note that like states implement their policies all in distinct ways. Like I said earlier, an equivalent policy in law may have very different implications for clean energy deployment and project development in practice. And so we'll include details on how that might play out in practice for some of these approaches. So predominantly state siting, we're starting at the top box here. We have two policy approaches within that. The first one is full state authority, which is Connecticut, Maryland, Vermont, and West Virginia. That is exactly how it sounds. The state agency maintains authority over permitting decisions for renewables, regardless of project size. And then the next policy approach within this framework is called contingent state authority. And that's where there's a set threshold, typically based on the megawatt capacity of a project, that determines whether the state or the local government is the permitting authority. So, for example, in Nevada, the Public Utility Commission has jurisdiction over renewable energy projects that are above 70 megawatts. But the Nevada Public Utility Commission uh, can, must grant or deny an application within. Yeah. So there's like a threshold. And then anything below that, the local government has siting authority over. And it's very like cut and dry. There's no exceptions around this rule. Nevada, like state agency, is 70 megawatts and above. And below that, it's up to the local government on however they want to regulate those projects. Okay, so now let's talk about hybridity. Hybrid, local and state hybrid, in this case, basically means there's some options for permitting at the state, local level, or both. So one policy approach that's interesting under the hybrid banner is local government assumption of primary authority. That's that second bullet point there, which is represented by Minnesota and Wisconsin. In both states, there is a state siting authority that is kind of the default, I guess. And a local government may elect to be the primary permitting authority under certain circumstances. So in Minnesota, for example, solar projects above 50 megawatts are permitted by the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. But local governments can choose to permit wind facilities 5 to 25 megawatts, between 5 to 25 megawatts, by adopting an ordinance that complies with the state law. And developers also have an option to seek local permitting for projects up to 80 megawatts. But at the same time, local governments can just request to back off and have the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission take care of everything, regardless of capacity threshold. So it's basically this hybrid situation where the local government can use discretion on whether they want to be involved in or not. And the benefit of that permitting pathway is that a lot of local governments may lack the expertise and resources to site clean energy projects. And so establishing a state entity as a default siting authority ensures that the administrative burden of conducting siting reviews is borne on the state, unless a local government chooses to assume that obligation and wants to be involved. Okay. The next hybrid framework that I want to touch on is the opt-in, opt-out state authority. In this case, developers can choose whether a state or local permitting pathway is the pathway that they want to go down. And this usually depends on the needs of their particular project. So there's two examples of this that I want to go through. First, there's Nebraska. All projects that are over 10 megawatts are subject to review by the Nebraska Power Review Board. But they also have to still receive local permitting. So it's a very true version of a hybrid approach. However, a developer can decide that they don't even want to go through the state siting process. They just want to only pursue siting through the local government. So that's usually if, there's a lot of trust and the community is very amenable to development, and the developer feels like they're going to have a really easy time getting this through. That's why they would want to pursue that pathway. And this is kind of the opposite of California's siting law, where developers are allowed to opt into a state permitting pathway to basically circumvent local government siting. And those are for projects over 50 megawatts. So instead of opting out of a state process, they're opting in. And so there's two versions of that. And why would a developer want to go through a local government or go through the state? The local siting option typically does tend to be the cheapest and the fastest process when developers have effectively engaged local governments and when communities are receptive to development. And so providing project developers the choice to opt in to the state siting process, that can allow them to basically choose the process that they think is going to be the smoothest. It also, gives local governments this notion that they need to negotiate more productively if they want to maintain the local process. Okay, so now we're in that middle box called state guardrails on local siting. So this is sort of like a hybrid approach, but instead of there being an actual permitting agency at the state level, they're just setting guardrails or standards for what the local process has to look like. So you all may be familiar with this approach. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with siting, but this is a very popular approach. And Virginia actually just passed a kind of somewhat of a version of this that I'll touch on later. So state standards can basically prescribe a ceiling or a floor that allows local governments to set either their own permissive or their own restrictive standards accordingly. And this is where it's really important to think about how this is, a perfectly the same exact law could be implemented a little bit, or the same exact approach could be implemented differently based on the state's objective, whether they want to encourage growth, renewable energy growth, or discourage it. So, for example, Illinois is kind of the case of the standards bill or the siting standards legislation. So in 2023, they created mandatory solar siting standards and wind for height, setback distances. They required local governments to incorporate all of these statewide standards that they passed into their zoning ordinances. And this law basically provided a ceiling on how restrictive a local government's ordinance can be. So there were just ceilings on the height limitations of turbines, the setback distances from solar panels to road right-of-ways and property lines, and just other standards that counties cannot make more restrictive for these technologies. Now, on the flip side of this, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Tennessee, and North Dakota all have examples of floor state standards, where the state will mandate minimum setbacks and maximum height limits or minimum noise limits that the county cannot make more permissive for renewables. So, for example, if the state standards, required really, really restrictive setbacks for solar, say like 1,000 feet from a property line, but a county in, Oklahoma, if they wanted to actually host a renewable energy project and they wanted to have those setbacks be 50 feet from the property line, that would not be allowed. Now, this hasn't been passed in a lot of these states. It hasn't been passed comprehensively. There have been certain standards like decommissioning standards or a specific setback distance that have been set, but it hasn't been like a comprehensive ban or ceiling law. But these are examples of attempts to restrict renewable energy in these states. Okay. So we have then we're getting down the table to the predominantly local siting. So this is basically the scenario that I mentioned in the very beginning, where a local government adopts a zoning ordinance that regulates the technology, where it goes in their community, and the developer submits an application for a land use permit and goes through that traditional local process. Um, a state example of this is in Montana. There's quite a few states that just adhere to this traditional local siting process. And localities have full discretion on what these projects look like, whether they, allow them or not. And these are kind of the states where there's still, well, sometimes it's not a problem, local siting, like local governments are completely receptive to renewable energy and are not, and there's not a lot of restrictions. But in other states, there will be, upcoming efforts to institute reforms to make to kind of balance the power dynamics of local governments against development. Okay, and lastly, out of all the policy approaches, we have the very bottom, minimal siting regulations. And this is where a local government, they don't or they cannot make land use decisions, which provides kind of the most protection of property rights. So this is where you'll see, like in states that kind of have a real high value on private property rights, where they'll utilize this framework a lot. So one example, Texas is kind of the only pure example of this in the nation that actually prohibits unincorporated areas from zoning, so counties. So townships they can actually plan and zone and regulate these technologies. It's just not as common in the state, outside of cities and larger areas, but more rural, less resourced townships just don't really do it. And so in these types of states, you'll see a lot of renewable energy deployment. I mean, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, they all have really, really high renewable energy capacities, specifically wind, just because of the resource potential there and because it's really, really easy to develop because there's no, regulation on the siting and the permitting of these technologies. So, those are the siting policy approaches. I think there's like maybe one or two that I didn't cover, and within those, there were a ton of bullet points of the different flavors of these frameworks that I didn't touch on, but we would be here for so long. But hopefully that gives you a taste of, what's in the full report. Go check it out. I have it all linked in the slides. So there's no best policy, no silver bullet here. What works well in Texas is not going to work well in Massachusetts. And so we really want to stress like each policy needs to be tailored to the particular cultural, geographical, political context of the state. And that's why, our organization exists and other organizations exist to kind of advise on, what the best policy approach or model might be. But we did come out with a report called the Renewable Energy Siting Policy Field Guide that identifies six principles for effective siting policy. And we were able to basically map those effective siting policies or principles and create models that we've seen work throughout the country. So the six principles that we identified in the best siting policies in the country are number one, clear rules. You create predictable, transparent permitting processes with consistent standards. Number two, timely decisions, enforceable timelines that provide certainty for the developer. They know when the decision is going to be made, at what point in time. It can't drag out for, years and years and years. Number three, a fair process for the community and the developer. You need to base decisions on objective criteria rather than political pressure. Your permitting decisions should be based on your zoning ordinance and your master plan, and all of the other review criteria that are set through your government's regulations. Number 4, economic opportunity. Protecting the rights of landowners, workers, and communities to actually utilize the benefits and take advantage of those benefits of renewable energy development. And tying up onto that, community benefits, make sure that there is meaningful local input and tangible benefits for host communities. Like I said earlier, these benefits are largely invisible, and so the more you engage with community members, and better understand their priorities and what they want to see in a benefit structure, the more fair of a process and it will be, and the more that they'll be able to kind of inform how they want to receive benefits. And then lastly, land stewardship. Plan for and manage impacts on agricultural lands, wildlife, and habitats. Be a good steward of the environment. And that will also increase trust and transparency in the community as well. So the 4 models that work that kind of uphold all of these principles, I'm bringing it all together in the report, is the safety net model, the guardrails model, the threshold model, and the referee model. These should not be adopted whole cloth, but it can easily be modified and combined. And we've basically seen that these models balance the roles of the states and local governments while still achieving those 6 effective policy principles that I just outlined. So the first model, and kind of the best, example of the models that we like to give, is the safety net model. It allows local siting where it can proceed productively, and it provides a state siting option when local governments prefer or refuse to adopt reasonable processes and standards. So this kind of combines the local and state hybrid processes, the state guardrails process, the contingent state authority processes. If you see that table that I showed earlier in the presentation, like, you can kind of start mapping where the different policy approaches can fit within these models. It's fun if you're a nerd like me. So the pros of this is that it sets high but still attainable bars for entry into the state process. So it incentivizes local siting first, as the priority, as the default. But if that doesn't work out, the developer still has an option still has a pathway to developing this project through the state. The cons is that this does require significant state resources to conduct these state level reviews, because it is essentially creating a state level permitting authority. And so you need a lot of staff, you need a lot of expertise and capacity. And also the multiple permitting pathways do introduce complexity and confusion for local governments. The best example of the safety net model is Michigan. They passed PA 233 in 2023, and it created basically a compliance-based framework that allowed local governments to retain control over permitting large renewable energy projects if they adopted what was called a compatible renewable energy ordinance. And so that's where those state standards come in. If the local government failed to adopt that ordinance, or denied a project even with an ordinance, then the developer can go to the state for permitting. Okay. So the next model is the threshold model. This is basically the same as contingent state authority policy approach. For smaller projects, they're cited locally, and for larger projects, they're cited at the state, typically based on megawatt capacity. The pros of this is that smaller infrastructure projects require less expertise and are less contentious. And so it makes sense for them to be cited at the local level. And the cons is that this sometimes does encourage like sizing or sequencing from the developer to avoid the more strenuous state level review and bureaucratic process. And so this can be seen in Florida and South Carolina. They both have a threshold of 75 megawatts. And now, ever since those laws have been passed, the vast majority of projects are 74.9 megawatts in size, or they'll, phase the project. So there'll be one 74.9 megawatt project, and then on a side-by-side parcel a year later, there will be another 74.9 megawatt project. They're just called they're considered different projects when they're actually not. So that they're kind of bypassing the regulations there. So that's a concern. And then the guardrail model is basically a state standards model, sets setback distances, and basically preempts local zoning that's more restrictive, makes them adopt compliant zoning ordinances. The biggest challenge with this is when you're requiring a local government to adopt state standards, and then you also force them to conduct the hearing, they have no discretion over what their standards are, and yet they're still having to be responsible for public hearings that they have no ability to shape or participate fully in. And so that can be really contentious and cause a lot of negative feelings from the local government, which, is never very good. Developers, want strong and positive relationships with communities, and so that backlash can be kind of concerning. Illinois is kind of the shining example of this law in practice. I already talked about it, but creating a ceiling on project standards. Lastly, the referee model basically sets a reasonableness standard that ensures local siting processes and outcomes are justified and appropriately applied. It basically just creates kind of an appeals process that developers can go through. If their project is denied, it allows an appeals kind of process for them to go through litigation to get that project actually permitted. If the project fits within, a reasonable, standard of development. If a local government is denying that project in a way that's not reasonable, basically public health and safety, then it's likely that decision could be overturned in a referee model. The con of that is that that takes a lot of time and money on the developer, and also deepens distrust between both parties in a situation where they do want to maintain positive relationships. And so here I just want to show y'all, like, we mapped out where these models are deployed and how they are deployed. And again, you can see, just like the state policy approaches, these models are never typically used in, like, just only with one model. Wisconsin uses all four in certain ways. Michigan uses 3 of those models. South Carolina uses 3. And so basically this shows that you can easily combine and modify these to fit the context of the state. Okay, I know that y'all are in Virginia, so I wanted to touch on the new law that was just passed in Virginia. That's an example of a guardrails model in practice. So before the new law, 64% of Virginia's counties had banned or severely restricted utility scale solar development through local ordinances. And so in 2026, this session, Senator Van Valkenburg passed or sponsored SB 347, which then passed. It established siting standards in local government special land uses for solar projects. And this basically set a ceiling for how restrictive local governments can go with their zoning ordinances for solar. The thing is it does not preempt local permitting, so local governments can still deny the project. Even like they can set their local ordinances to fit these standards. That's kind of the one rule. But then even when a developer proposes a project, they can still deny it. They just have to report that denial and justify that denial to the state corporation commission. So it doesn't go so far as to completely flat out ban like the denial of it all. but it's still a really positive step in the direction by setting these project standards. There was a ban on bans that was proposed in this legislative session, but it didn't pass. Yeah. And so siting policy reform is just one piece of the puzzle. I did want to touch on this like really, really quickly. I know we should probably get to questions, but Juan Botero, who recruited me to do this, he said that y'all might also be interested in kind of like the benefits side of things. So we do a lot of siting policy work here, but we also like to do what we like to focus on what's called secondary siting policy solutions. And that's really like hosting renewable energy, hosting solar, a more compelling case to communities. And the way that you do that is through a lot of different levers, mostly, better engagement processes and financial economic benefits. And so first, though, I want to say it does take more than cash. And this is coming from a research paper here. It's called the Win-Win Solutions. Dr. David Adelman he's a lawyer from UT Austin. He wrote this paper called Overcoming the Economic and Legal Barriers to Local Acceptance of Clean Energy Projects. And my colleague Nelson Falkenberg wrote a white paper basically synthesizing what the lessons learned in that paper. And what that paper shows is that the social science does show this over and over again, that late engagement from a developer poisons the well. You got to go early and often, and you got to be as transparent as possible and engage meaningfully with community members to build trust. Because the more trust you have, the more local acceptance you have. The data shows it. Anecdotally, when we talk to developers and when we talk to local governments, regardless of outcome, the more trust and transparency and input a local government has in the process, the better they feel about the renewable energy project as a whole. And so Dr. David Edelman does present a three-part solution. First, payment in lieu of taxes. Instead of going through these traditional property tax schemes, negotiating payment in lieu of taxes agreements to create more consistent payments across the lifetime of a project. That can be a real benefit to the community in terms of financial planning for their local government. Entering into development agreements, which are contractual frameworks that allow a local government to condition or to basically promise that they will give them a permit under really good siting conditions in exchange for really solid and tangible community benefits. And there's a negotiating structure that can happen within that framework. And then lastly, utilizing all of these secondary siting solutions, but doing it within the safety net siting model. Because this policy framework does preserve as much local control as possible, while still allowing for a pathway for developers to utilize if after everything it doesn't go well and they do still need to go through the state. But the more local control, the more local input possible without obstruction, is the best way to go and delivering on real benefits. And so I want to tag that or shout out that we will be having a tax policy report that will be published later this year in October, because we're still really grappling with this issue of, how can we better structure our current tax policy structures in various states to deliver better, more like certain and substantial benefits to communities so that they're no longer feeling like these benefits are invisible, that they don't even exist. We want them to know that, renewable energy development can be an opportunity and can provide real benefits to their community. And maybe there's ways for us to structure them differently to do that. So we're doing a lot of research on that right now, and keep an eye out. And then, these are my links to all of our reports that we've done so far. We'll also be coming out with a State of Siting 2026 legislative roundup in July, and that'll basically summarize all of the trends and kind of outcomes of the siting siting policy and all of the state legislative sessions this year. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. And yeah, I really appreciate y'all listening to my long ramble about siting policy. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, I guess I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you very much. It was very great to see there are different framework, what's happening around the United States in terms of all these different rules and the policy. Do we have any question?
Yeah, sure. So I
Yes.
had not actually raised my hand, but just a quick one. Yeah, very good presentation, Zona.
Thank you.
So yeah, just wanted to check, Zona, in your role, what is the single biggest point of oh, sorry, my name is Oluwachwere, a transitioning developer. So just wanted to check, in your role, what's the single biggest point of concern you mostly see with local officials, whereby they do struggle with, drafting utility scale solar ordinances? And how can we better design our early stage site prospecting to proactively align with what the state, the local governments, and communities actually want to see? Like
What's what is
what's your
the biggest
single,
what's the yeah,
biggest
what's
single, biggest point of concern, sorry.
for local governments when they're drafting renewable energy ordinances?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Oh God, there's a lot. I think that I could like narrow it down to like maybe three, but I'd say the biggest is like actual like the concept of zoning itself, of location control, being able to control where they want these specific land uses to be located within their community. A lot of times a community's idea of where they want these in their zoning map and where they parcel them out does not align with where a developer has signed leases with landowners and where there are interconnection points to the grid. And so there is just a mismatch there. And I think communicating that to a local government is really difficult as well. That, yes, you've already thought proactively about this, or maybe you haven't, but I know you only want to carve out this little area for renewable energy over here, maybe in your industrial district or something. But the proposal is located over there in that parcel of land, and that's kind of it, and you need to work with that. And that kind of goes against like the initial principle of like local zoning and what local governments are really used to when they think about zoning. But it's something that I think that it's something they need to start grappling with and adjusting to. Yeah. And decommissioning, I'd say, is another really, really big issue for them. They're really worried about end of life and whether the project is going to be left there and abandoned by a developer that they don't trust. What else? I'd say that those are probably and farmland loss. Even though it's not like there is there is data out there that shows even if we developed as much as we needed and more, it would only be about maybe like 2% of all farmland in the United States. But it's just a real emotional feeling for them that they're losing all of this farmland. And when you couple development with other renewable development with other types of development that they're also getting proposed for, that also leads to lost farmland, it's kind of a factor that just kind of dominoes, and it causes a lot of unease.
See, I see. Great response there. Very insightful. Just a follow-up questions with regards to more or less the same. Because I understand from my experience, you realize that in my case, I've mainly dealt with national governments, but I also understand that local governments frequently pause or update their zoning rules right when a developer is trying to get a permit. how, from a project management perspective, especially I understand that you do provide technical assistance through, what's the name? Is it Renewable Energy Academy or something? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was my previous position, but yes, that's what we did.
Oh, okay, okay. So, what will be your advice, especially on how solar project managers can best engage with local planning departments to help keep a project moving smoothly while the local government is actively updating, its renewable energy rules? Because from my basic understanding, they keep changing from time to time. How best would you, think of a project manager? Just
Oh,
making sure that everything moves smoothly while these rules or laws keep changing.
that's so hard.
Yeah.
Um, I get what you're saying. Like it is, I mean, that was kind of one of the biggest issues that we were trying to tackle before in Michigan, before the state siting law came into effect. There were so many local governments that had not updated their zoning ordinances, but we knew that the development was coming, and it's so much better to be proactive and have a local zoning ordinance that already zones and plans for renewable energy before a developer comes in. And because that means you've already considered everything, and you've already had these conversations with your community, and so you're not like kind of being very reactionary when a developer comes in. But that's not always the case. And so when that isn't, and a developer is kind of actively working with the local government to adjust their zoning ordinance to fit the development's needs, I just say transparency, being really open about why, like if they have a question about setbacks, or why can't you accept this setback that I want, what is the reason for that? I like be very open about why, like explain the project finance mechanisms, and be very upfront and transparent to them. They want to understand where you're coming from, and they don't want to be lied to. So yeah, just explaining as much as possible about why a project needs to look like this, and therefore why a zoning ordinance needs to look like this, based on the economics and kind of just industry standards of how a project needs to be developed.
I see.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
want to jump in here if that's okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Juan
Hi.
Botero. I recruited Zona to be the speaker today. I've been helping advise on the curriculum, and just thank you, Zona. This has been an amazing presentation and already a great conversation. I see there's more questions. The only thing I would add, maybe for everybody to be thinking about, is just that there's a really important and key role for trusted messengers to play
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
this, right? It doesn't all have to be like the developer and the local government talking. There could be a local nonprofit that can show up and also be a part of the conversation, or it could be the university, right? It could be extension, it could be so many other groups. Trust dynamics are really important. And so finding those trusted messengers, because they're different from community to community, is really, really, really important. And that's, I think, what unlocks a lot of those better win-win outcomes is making sure that there's someone that is trusted in those conversations.
That's such a good point. And when we were implementing the Renewable Energy Academy Technical Assistance Program in Michigan, Juan was actually my project manager at the DOE. But we did think about that. We were like, who needs to be leading these conversations at town halls and communities? Who needs to be kind of the point contact about a question around a specific concern that a community has? And we leaned really heavily on Michigan State University Extension offices. And I think it's very important to even consider like which university you're utilizing. Like there's a difference in Michigan, and even here in Texas, like there's a difference between University of Texas and Texas A&M in terms of the level of respect that community members and in rural communities and agricultural communities have to to people from those specific universities. So that's why, Michigan State University, that's the ag extension. Like those are the people that are in these counties all the time advising on, environmental and agricultural practices. I mean, those they were really efficient. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you. We have one question from Malaika. You can ask. I see your hands are up.
Great presentation. And I just had a question on the I understand like the opt-in and opt-out model is framed as kind of giving developers flexibility. And I'm kind of curious about how this is used in practice and if it's like used to maybe kind of dangerously undermine community buyout sometimes and like instead of it like to circumvent the communities that are kind of resistant.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly kind of why at least in California, that was part of the reason why it was created. Um, because there were restrictive ordinances going on or communities that were trying to regulate these projects in a way that made it almost infeasible to develop. And so, yeah, creating that opt-in or opt-in mechanism allowed for the developer to just circumvent the local process completely and go to the state level. And as far as yeah, like the opting out when it's the opposite, the local government is really receptive to development. That's when the kind of mechanism flips on its head and the developer might want to opt out of the state process. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious if this is ever you, if there's ever like a lot of like after this has been done, is there ever like a lot of community like hatred, I guess?
Totally. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, so like in Illinois specifically and in Michigan, I'm mostly like experienced in the Midwest area. But so they kind of did a version of kind of an opt-in, but it was the state standards where, if you well, I guess Michigan is a better example. If you adopt this version of an ordinance, then you can keep your local authority. And if you don't, then a developer can opt into a state process. They don't have to, but they can if they want. And oh my God, there's lawsuits going on right now in Michigan. There's like, there was a whole ballot initiative. Local governments are extremely upset. When I was there, when the bill was getting passed, there was, huge, township association of county organizations that were kind of rallying all of their members, their local municipal members, to oppose this bill. And it was kind of a miracle that it even got passed without their support. But yeah, there's been a lot of backlash. And that's definitely something that should be considered when you're passing these policies because you really need to think about, down the line in 10 years, if politics change, what might happen? How might these things shift? So,
Thank you so much. That does answer my question.
Another question? I have one. When you are mentioning the different roles, every state has kind of different capacity limit. For example, you said Minnesota has like looking for 50 megawatt and higher, Nevada 70 megawatt. Do you have an idea how they are coming with this kind of capacity limit, or it's just kind of random?
yeah, and I mean that's kind of our one of our concerns when states are passing thresholds is, sometimes they're really arbitrary and there's no reasoning behind it. And so, we would definitely advise, on thinking through why you're setting that number. And, as industries change, like how flexible can you be? Um, I I don't know exactly why Minnesota set theirs. I know that a lot of the new thresholds that are being set kind of mirror the average size that private developers are starting to kind of start at. So I mentioned earlier that, nowadays there's kind of an average like 100 megawatts kind of size threshold where developers are leaning towards because economies of scale lend better to, those larger projects. They make more money off of it. The project finances are safer. Um, and so they're going to want to develop larger scale. And so when you're developing larger scale, you're going to need it's going to be more contentious. And so that's why a lot of states will set it at like kind of the minimum size or average size that developers are kind of working with nowadays. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question? I'm checking the chat. Any question? Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation and time for joining us. I learn a lot. And it is good to know, there are so many different frameworks we can choose, depends on, the project and the rules. And thank you for your time and all your great presentation again.
Thank y'all for inviting me to speak. And yeah, check us out, read our reports. And also I'll send you all my slides. I guess I'll send it to Remy's email address. And if y'all want to reach out to my email with any more questions that you have, please feel free. I'm always happy to answer anything else. And yeah, I hope I convinced y'all to become siting policy nerds.
Yeah. And
Is
for the class, we have two speakers in our next session. Fanny Severs from Director of Permitting Strata Clean Energy, and Charles Newcomb. He's a consultant in Mana Group Consulting. They will be talking about local decision making, planning, zoning, and what a hearing bill means. And we would like to thank you again, our speaker today, Zona. And also we would like to thank our sponsor, Google, for this program. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, let us know. If not, see you on next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I have-
Thank
yeah,
thank
thank you
you.
for your call. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next week. Bye.
Okay, bye now.